has been part of WECF for over 27 years. And Svitlana is here today as an incredible environmental activist. And I think we can all say that we're so honored to have you here, Svitlana. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, civil society, dear Olga Algayerova, Executive Secretary, I am Svitlana Slesarenok, environmental expert and activist from the NGO Black Sea Women's Club, Ukraine. It is a honor for me to make opening speech for today Civil Society Sustainable Development Forum. The Stockholm Declaration, adopted in 1972 by the UN Conference of Human Environment, for the first time was the document which recognized the interconnection between development, environment, and poverty. 50 years after Stockholm Declaration, I assure that all of representatives which are here, all of you, are working very hardly, and we worked together, our global community, to develop common understanding and instruments on sustainable development for our healthier planet and for prosperity for all. Our planet still faces for increasing environmental challenges and for growing inequality affecting development and well-being. But now at least we have some important instruments like 70 Sustainable Development Goals, which was adopted by all countries in 2015. This year, we are specifically looking at the project, on the progress of SDG 4 education, at the progress of SDG 5 gender equality, on the progress of SDG 14 sea and oceans, on the progress of SDG 15 forest and biodiversity, and on the progress of SDG 17, implementation and partnerships. We were seeing quite big success and real progress in our region. We worked together, all experts on sustainable development, on environmental, on climate changes, all over former Soviet Union. We were together, but on the February on 24th, Russia started a war against my country, against sovereign state, Ukraine. They reversing progress on the 2030 agenda, endangering world peace, food security, and sustainability, resulting in millions of refugees and thousands of deaths and injured. And now when I asked to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, I say, SDG 14, what does it mean today, for example, for the country from Black Sea regions? For the country from Black Sea regions, SDGs 14, now it means mines unexploded, which we should take away from seas. It means shipwrecks, which was attacked by missiles from Russia's ships. It means sea pollution. Russian army put it into Black Sea 4,200 mines. It is very dangerous. SDG 15 for Ukraine and neighboring countries today, forests and biodiversity protection means dealing with the terrible pollution of air, terrible pollution of water, soils, everything which can be polluted by bombed out oil facilities, by burning bombed out roads, destroyed civilians, residential buildings. Now in Ukraine, it is destroyed about 8,000 of residential, multi-family, multi-apartments building. It is huge, huge pollution. In particular, we are very worried about a number of forest fires in Chernobyl's so-named red forest. As a result of the shutting, which has led to increased emission for the radioactivity. And we are in fear of the potential threat from Russian attacks and accident at over nuclear power plants. You might have seen the photo of the hundreds of brave citizens from Energodar city that stood in front of the Russian tanks to try to stop them from going to our biggest nuclear plant of Zaporozhye. The daughter of my brother-in-law also participated. Also, she striked a lot of days, but finally, you know, the result, the nuclear plant was attacked by Russian army. SDG5. SDG5 for Ukraine today, it means many women and girls died in suffering from rape, abuse, and horrifying violence by Russian soldiers. The number of women, also for Ukraine, it means the number of women soldiers. Mainly this is young women. 50,000 of young women is participating in Ukrainian army. This is huge amount. The doctors and nurses working partly in bombed out hospitals and with a lack of medicines, many are women, like my daughter-in-law. This woman stay in war. Do you know what does it mean for women to stay in war? Their children have to flee the country without their parents, like in my family. My grandchildren are living together with me. We are refugees in Romania. SDG 4. For Ukraine today, it means more than 211 schools have been bombed and destroyed. And day to day, we have more and more destroyed and bombed schools. Children no more are going to school. They have even died. According to the Prosecutor General Office in Ukraine, we have now more than 150 children were killed and more than 222 injured in Ukraine. But this without counting the dead children in the occupied city like Mariupol. And we still have a huge amount of territory occupied. And we don't have huge amount. We have these killed children in occupied regions. It is terrible. We have many refugees, about 4 million. And we have from 6 to 12 millions internally displaced people. We have the people who lost their job, who lost their food, who lost their houses. Many houses is bombed. There is nothing more unsustainable than war and militarism. We might be close even to the nuclear war. You understand this already. We must clearly and distinctly understand that this war is not for only against Ukraine. This war is against sustainable development. This war is against SDG. This war is against our common future. This war is against our dreams about sustainable development. For example, with Sasha, we worked for the last 27 years for our common future, for our common value. And we don't want to give to the militarism, to the war, to stop our dream. We need to get to stop the war, respect and uphold international law, build peace, and find the way how to protect our common values. For a healthy planet, for the respect, prosperity for all. This is our common responsibility. Because we so lot to dig together, we developed last 50 years this, and we stood to stop this war. Thank you. I would like to also to thank from all Ukrainians for the solidarity which we see around the globe. Thank you a lot. It is very supportive for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Svitlana. It's very sobering and important that we start our CSO forum and indeed the regional forum with these words. The United Nations was founded on the principle of human rights, solidarity, international law, that we would never see again what we are now seeing in Europe. And I hope this will set us on course for us to work together across boundaries, across age groups, across diversities, so we all support each other to make the world sustainable and the United Nations dream real again. So I'm going to hand over now to Rashima to follow. I don't know how we follow you really, but again, as Rashima said, she's an international advocacy advisor on gender equality, working for all historically underrepresented groups, including LGBTI persons. And apart from co-chairing this session, Rashima is going to speak about the priorities of youth in achieving the SDGs, because it is with the youth and age together, we will change the world. And thank you, Rashima, if you can say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you so very much, Svitlana. I think many of us can continue to echo the solidarity that we have to all the people in Ukraine. And I just wanted to reiterate that statement, the very powerful statement that you made, which is there is nothing more unsustainable than war and militarism. And there is no way we will reach the Agenda 2030 in the way that the world is moving right now. My name is Rashima Kwatra. I'm an international advocacy advisor with RFSL, which is the Swedish Federation for LGBTQI rights. And I'm here today representing youths who gathered at the youth pre-meeting to the regional forum last Friday on the 1st. I wanted to acknowledge once again that this is an incredibly difficult time for our region. And we know that it is now more than ever that states and stakeholders need to be committed to advancing progress on the SDGs and doing so with the explicit inclusion of young people and youths. Youth all over the region express solidarity with the people of Ukraine, as well as those in Russia who are standing against the government. Youth today recognize that we are not inheriting the future that we deserve. Youths who are already vulnerable are amongst the hardest hit by COVID-19. This includes young women and girls, LGBTI youth, Indigenous youths, youths with disabilities, migrant youths, and other youths. Yet, we who have been among the hardest hit are hardly represented or included in decision-making or in the design, monitoring, or implementation of response and recovery programs and policies. This year's theme, Building Back Better from the Coronavirus Disease, while advancing the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in the UNECE region. What we need is to build forward better, not look backwards. Young people all over the region recognize that we lack financial support, though we are the best place to serve our communities and are experts in the lives of young people. We face high barriers in participating in consultations, including in accessing information, and are hardly being actively engaged in consultations. Intersecting forms of discrimination, such as ageism, sexism, ableism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, and interphobia, prevent us from participation. Considering the many time constraints expressed and faced by youth, including going to school, working, and also having mental and physical health issues, continue to increase the barriers that we face in active participation and in public decision-making. This is also a gendered issue. More young girls are affected by the amount of unpaid work and unhealthy standards and harmful gender and social roles that we face in society. Youths do not want tokenistic inclusion. We deserve to speak on our own behalf. To rectify this, we ask for support from local authorities and member states and all stakeholders in this room and around the world in promoting the inclusion of youth by listening to us, by including us and meaningfully including us, and by providing financing and increasing flow of information to youths on how we can support and be actively included in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. We were also able to discuss the SDG goals being reviewed in this year's HLPF, and we expressed concern that COVID-19 has exacerbated existing inequalities and vulnerabilities, specifically on SDG 4 on inclusion. We spoke to our colleagues who said young people with disabilities did not have their accessibility requirements met with the transition on online learning. Additionally, there's a lack of support and awareness around systematically excluded groups who face high barriers to accessing SDG 4. This includes, again, young members of the LGBTQI community, persons with disabilities, and persons who are not spoken about in mainstream education nor actively included in the programs and policies in schools. Furthermore, youths face barriers and high risks of exclusion and do not have proper access to comprehensive sexuality education and equitable access to education. We call for more inclusive programs and policies in education that reflect and meet the needs of the diversity of all youth. Not everyone can participate in education equally, and more attention should be paid towards supporting poor students and students who live in non-urban areas to ensure that we have equal access to education. On SDG 14 and 15, we discussed at the pre-meeting that we need to stop deforestation, which often occurs as the result of mining companies' interests and private interests over the interests of the public and over the interests of young people. We call on countries to ratify ILO 169 as the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples is vital to sustainable development. We need clear regulation and monitoring to stop illegal and unsustainable fishing methods. We need to stop polluting our waters, where we see a future with more plastic than fish in the seas. Moving forward, we believe that our pre-meeting was a good example of SDG 17. We all worked in partnership across different countries in our region. We had an accessible event with the provision of interpretation in Russian, international sign language interpretation, and live captioning. We ask for the UN to work with youth and local NGOs, as it is only with our explicit inclusion that we can achieve the 2030 agenda. I would like to now pass the floor back to Sylvia and end by saying again that youth must be included. We cannot have tokenistic inclusion, and we really do deserve to speak on our own behalf. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rashima. That was great. I want to also say that all of these statements will be available on our website, the ECRSM website, hopefully soon. And again, thank all the panelists. Olga, thank you so much. I know you have to run.
I'm sorry.
But we will be seeing you and being in
Absolutely.
touch, and thank you for your solidarity.
All the best for
Thank
everybody,
you.
and thank you for having me here. And but really, I have another meeting.
I
So
know. Thank
have
you.
a successful meeting. All the best. Have a good discussion.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Olga. And thank you, Rashima, for that. Svitlana. I don't know if Sasha, you want to just briefly take us through the agenda
Once more? Yes, sure.
once more, because now we sort of commence the meeting proper. And thank you for the opportunity to
Okay.
moderate today.
Well, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much for joining us. So while we have a change of the people on the panel, thank you very much, Svitlana, Rashima, and Sylvia. I invite already Nelia and her panelists to join at the table. I'll make some space because I think there'll be quite a few people. And maybe, Rose, if you could just show us the previous slide with the agenda once more for the newcomers who have just joined us. Welcome everybody who joined us in the room. We understand there were some challenges with some of the passes, but I see many of you managed to get in, so that is really wonderful. Thank you for joining. The same for the participants online, where we also had a few challenges, but we're really great that we have a good group of people. We're now going to our second session with about 15 minutes delay, SDG priority themes for the HLPF and for the Regional Forum, and Nelia will be presenting that and chairing that. So Nelia, the floor is yours.
Do we know if we have speakers online?
Yep. We have online our speakers. Patricia from EEB, are you there? You will need to raise your hand once you want to speak so that the technical people can see that you are one of our speakers. Yeah, great. So Patricia is there, wonderful. How about Ernestine? Are you also with us? Yes, Ernestine, the same for you. You will need to raise your hand when it's your turn so we can give you the floor. Ça va? Okay, great. Nelia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sasha. Hello, everyone, dear colleagues. I'm also really happy that we are meeting today here in this hall, finally in person. Of course, also I thank Svitlana for her wonderful speech. Just to again introduce myself, for those who don't know me, my name is Nelia Rahimova. I represent organization Open School for Sustainable Development and also Coalition for Sustainable Development of Russia. And today I'm honored to moderate this session with dear colleagues who sit next to me, and we have two speakers online. So I hope that we will not have any technical issues. Technical support is with us. And yeah, for just for your information, to hear speakers online, you need to use headphones, which are laying in front of you. So it will not be like a big speaking sound. So when we will give floor to the speakers, please be sure to use the headphones. And also we have translation, just to remind you. Today, our session is about SDGs under review. As you probably know, every year we have different SDGs under review because we have 17 in total, but it's quite challenging to review all of them every year. That's why every year UN Secretariat provides us more or less with a list of SDGs which will be under review. And this year we have 5 SDGs. Just to remind you, it's SDG 4, 5, 14, 15, and 17. And this session is particularly about this SDGs. And we will hear from our colleagues on each SDG, the main status, what is happening in our region, and we I hope also will hear recommendations on each SDG. And in the end, I will open the floor for everyone that you can make contributions if you think that some oh, my microphone is not on. Yes. No?
So we cannot hear you.
Is it better like this? Can you hear me? Is it just you or everyone cannot hear me?
Okay.
You hear me? Okay. Yeah. If you sit in the back, because there are no speakers in the classic terms here, you always need to use the headphone for this case. So please. Okay. I'm sorry for any technical issues. I hope they will be solved. So yeah, where was I? Yeah, so we will now proceed with our speakers in the order of each SDG, and I would like, I was interrupted about talking about opening floor. In the end, I will open the floor for any of your comments. If you want to add any comments on any SDG, if you want to bring some particular cases to our attention, provide particular recommendations, we are looking forward for your recommendations, comments, discussion. We will not have much time, but we will try to take any inputs that we will have in the floor and maybe even online, right, Sasha? Yes, I will then proceed to the first speaker on SDG 4, education. Just to remind you, it's Dr. Ernestine Melha. I hope I pronounce your name correctly, from Association for Education of Children with Disabilities. Please, the floor is yours. You have, just to remind you, 7 minutes.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ernestine Melha. I am the founder and executive director of the Association d'aide à l'éducation de l'enfant handicapé. We are working in France and in African countries. Today, I am speaking on behalf of women major groups, and I am speaking about SDG 4. Education contributes to gender equality, poverty reduction, and building prosperous, resilient economic, and peaceful, stable societies, while empowering children, youth, and adults to realize their full potential and to participate in society. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted enrollment, retention, learning process, and outcomes. Not all learners are impacted equally. Those who are already most marginalized have been most impacted. So we recommend to address the holistic needs of all learners from early childhood to adulthood to leave no one behind, especially the most vulnerable and marginalized, and address the education emergency of those affected by conflicts and crises. Thank you so much.
Sorry. You see, I'm not used to microphones anymore in reality. Yes, thank you very much again for your contribution. And as I said, we already have some messages prepared, which we can later work on together, including to include it to civil society statement. And thank you very much, Ernestine. And we will collect comments later on SDG 4. So I would like to proceed to our wonderful speaker next to me, Valentina Bodrun-Lungu from Moldova, Gender Center on SDG 5. Please, Valentina, floor is yours. 7 minutes.
Thank you, Nelia. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We have many people from different countries. I am also a member of Women's Measure Group, and it's an honor for me to present us today, to present our common work. Due to the fact that to the statement contributed many people, and thanks a lot for your contribution. I would like to mention that SDG number 5, achieve gender equality and the power of all women and girls. It's very important. And we can discuss a lot, but it's very important to understand what is the current status of SDG number 5 implementation in our region. And we can mention the following. The adoption of strong legal framework on gender equality by the majority of the governments in the region involved several challenges in its implementation for many countries. Barriers remain in all areas of life, including but not limited to areas of employment and economic benefits, public and political life, gender-based violence, violence against women, social protection, sexual reproductive health and rights, bodily autonomy and others. Care and domestic work continue to be under-recognized and valued in almost all of the country. The COVID pandemic has come to intensify the different systemic barriers that women and girls and all their diversity face in order to develop without discrimination and free from all kinds of violence and inequality. But we should mention that will we try to recover from the impact of pandemic on gender equality, the anti-gender and anti-rights movement grow more powerful in our region. And we should take into consideration all these issues. What are our recommendations to the government and our region? Provide a holistic intersectional approach, including via gender mainstreaming to all policy and programs in all areas of development that aims to transform our current system to ones that are more equal and just. Ensure a gender-responsive intersectional approach to humanitarian work. Comply with international human rights law that guarantees the fundamental rights of women and girls in all their diversity. Ensure gender and sex disaggregated data collection and analysis. Promote gender-responsive budgeting for gender transformative intervention in all areas. Invest in creating decent and climate-friendly jobs in the current economy, which has a great potential for climate-friendly job creation and helps women regain their place in the labor force. Of course, focus attention to end discrimination, gender-based violence, and sexual harassment in the world of work. Gender equality is only possible through just and equal system. For this, governments should invest in a gender transformative macroeconomic global structure in vaccine equity and in peace. What are our recommendations to UN agencies in the region? Support involvement of civil society, specifically feminist and women's organizations, in national and regional SDG implementation by sustainable financing the SDGs. Ensure that women are included in the peace negotiation process and bodies, in line with UNECE 1325 resolution and other resolutions. Urge the restoration of peace today recognizing that war and conflicts are reversing progress achieved on Agenda 2030 in the whole region. And we recommend to our civil society connect feminist movement on local levels, which is those on regional and global levels, make space and take space to carry the voice of our region. Establish national, regional, and international platform for women to take joint decision and actions. Invest in solidarity between movements that is based on human rights and gender equality. Colleagues, we don't have a time. Women and men, girls and boys are suffering. We need to take actions now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Valentina, for your contribution. And I just want to remind you that we will be opening the discussion later on also SDG 5. So please make marks what I don't know is missing, what you would like to contribute later to the discussion. We are actually would be happy to hear any comments from you. And I would like to introduce next speaker, Elena Zharkova from Coalition for Sustainable Development of Russia. And Elena will talk on SDG 14 and the issues from the region for this particular goal. Do you need to connect your computer to show presentation slides, or can we somehow arrange it?
If you click on share, you have, you're in Zoom, yes?
No. No.
Is it online? Send the link to Nelia and Nelia.
I will send to you presentation email.
Sasha.
Email?
Presentation, because I thought you sent it to me also. I tried to find it, but I didn't. Sorry, colleagues, we just, for technical issues, we decided to switch the order, just not to lose time. So I will proceed to Anton Martina from International Youth Association. Alliance from Bulgaria will present points that we will actually develop to our colleagues on SDG 17. So we're really thankful, Anton, that you at the last minute decided to step in and help us with delivering the message on SDG 17. Please, Anton, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. SDG 17. SDG 17 covers many aspects related to the means of implementation of the Agenda 2030. Among them, we recognize targets related to multi-stakeholder partnerships as they to achieve the SDGs. Still, many European governments don't effectively involve civil society and the trade unions in SDG implementation. The lack of transparency, consultations, and social dialogue remain challenges. Also, key point is that a lot of countries are not using correctly the resolution of General Assembly from 2018. Resolution is 313/72. It's an indicator system that the governments approved and say that they will use for their accountability. Moreover, SDG 17 covers the essential aspects related to the financing of the 2030 agenda by setting several targets for SDG financing, which are far from being met. Our recommendation to the countries of SE region. Effectively involve civil society and trade unions in national SDG implementation by increasing transparency, consultation, and social dialogue. Social dialogue in particular is central to accelerate action on essential elements of the 2030 agenda, such as decent work, minimum living wages, social protection, gender equality, and just transition. Invest in financing the SDGs through several key policies, such as establishing progressive taxation system, extending social protection coverage to achieve universal coverage. Invest in decent climate, friendly jobs, and the care economy. Adopt regulation on minimum living wages and equal pay. Mainstream gender budgeting in national budgets, promoting business accountability in order for investments to comply with ILO standards, responsible business conduct principle, and due diligence. Recommendation to the UN agencies in the EC region: support meaningful participation of civil society and trade unions in national SDG implementation by promoting the enabling environment for civil society organizations and the exercise of human rights and fundamental freedoms, including freedom of association. Boost financing of the SDG by increased development cooperation, international tax cooperation, revocation of special drawings rights, transparent debts relief, restructuring and cancellation, promoting business accountability in development cooperation. Blended finance should be assessed according to its added value and comply with labor, fiscal, and environmental rules and responsible business conduct. We need strong regulative mechanism to give guarantees to all stakeholders will have equal rights to participate in the processes regarding to Agenda 2030 and achievements of SDG 17. And keep in mind that we are still in 2019 because we still feeling the impact of the pandemic and we have a war. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anton. Thank you for reminding that we're still in 2019. Yeah, I just would like to invite our last speaker at this panel on SDG 14, Elena Zharkova, Coalition for Sustainable Development of Russia. Please, Elena, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you for inviting me for this high-level meeting. I would like to speak about our oceans. I would like to show you the next slide. At first, I would like to remind you what is the ocean for our planet. Oceans is 71% of our planet, and 45% it's open seas. It means it's the oceans that nobody care in reality. And this is the half of our planet. At the same time, it's 97% of the water and more than 200 species and much more. It's still, we don't know. Next slide. What does it mean for people? Billions of people depend from the sea, and this is the food for billions of people. At the same time, oceans give us the climate, control everything in our planet, temperature and many other things. And at the same time, I would like to ask you just brief. First time and the second. And for second brief, we have oxygen from the ocean. So oceans is highly important for everybody. Please, the next slide. What is going on and why SDG 14 is so important for us now? At first time, I would like to say about pollution. What kind of pollution? Of course, it's plastic pollution. It's chemical pollution, pesticide pollution, it's heat pollution, it's noise pollution, it's radiation pollution, and many, many other things going on in the ocean. In reality, only 13% of our ocean is still clean. And all our ocean, it's about 90%. It's destroyed. The next things I would like to say, it's oxidation. Oxidation destroy all marine ecosystem, and it's highly connected with climate change. And the next things, it's overfishing. Overfishing, it's huge problem. And FAO speaks that 30% of our marine stocks is fished unsustainably. So it's the same huge problem. Ocean still overheated, polluted, and depleted. So I would like to show you the next slide. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Just to remind you how everything connects is the ocean. This is the map of the currents. You may see that all water and all oceans and is very well connected. And it's many people speaks that one planet and one ocean. That's why it's so important to work together with all the regions. And now I would like to back to our room from the ocean, from all this global perspective, and to speak about our recommendation and what is going on. From climate change to biodiversity loss to decline on the ocean health, everything is interconnected. A healthy ocean is a healthy planet. SDG 14 is the SDG most underachieved behind the terms and reach targets. And the Marine Conservation Institute reports that only 7% of the world ocean are protected and only 2% are truly fully protected. And in this case, I would like to speak about recommendation to our region. The ESE regions, colonial past means historical responsibilities toward our regions. The fulfill SDG 14, we need to transboundary and regional cooperation. We should support international efforts to raise standards for biodiversity protections, the necessary to apply nature-based solutions and ecosystem approach by 2030 planetary protection, designate the building super large marine protected areas network in the Southern Ocean. Blue food is an important source of nutrition to over 3 billion people. Remove harmful fisheries subsidies, stop IUU fishing. Sustainable fishery and agriculture are necessary part of food systems transformation and have potential to expand their reach in nature-friendly way. Financing is still challenging and require capacity building for innovation approach, including technical, traditional, and endangered knowledge is required. Implement pioneering solution for big ocean data challenges, make ocean data easier to find, use and apply to key decisions, improve data literacy, and stewardship across ocean community. Update international standards on bankage. Restore marine ecosystem of the Baltic Sea, Mediterranean Sea, the Black Sea, and Northeast Atlantic Sea. A recommendation to UN agency, World Trade Agency, removal of harmful fishery subsidies. UN FAO, improve cooperation to stop IUU fishing. Reduction and ban on pesticide and toxic for marine ecosystem elements. Ensure consistent switch to industrial agriculture and domestic application in green chemistry. United Nations Environment Assembly. Invitation of a negotiation for international treaty to stop plastic pollution. BBNJ conference. Conclusion of a robust treaty for governance of the high sea, ban deep sea mining. UN Ocean Conference. Agreement to limit ocean noise, action to restore ecosystems. UN Framework for Climate Conference. Zero carbon marine shipping. Recommendation for civil society. I would like to highlight that it's very important to unite worldwide civil society to straight control over double standards and greenwashing the implement of 2030 agenda. All hands on the desk in ocean affair is needed. It means the importance of full, equal, and of participation of women. It's important to support youth involvement in decision making. Carry out educational initiative about the ocean and the goal achievement. Continue to demand from the states the fulfillment of obligation to realize the rights of citizens to healthy environment. One planet, one ocean.
Thank you very much, Elena. Our last actually speaker for today will be online, Patricia Heidegger from European Environmental Bureau. She will report for us on SDG 15. Please, Patricia.
Yes, hello everybody. Hi colleagues, very good to see you. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Yes, sure, please.
Okay, I'm going to briefly speak about SDG 15 under review and a few key data from our region about SDG 15. So first of all, let's have a look at some key data from a global perspective. So SDG 15, Life on Land, is about protecting, restoring, promoting the sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and biodiversity loss. So if we look at global figures, we can see that more than a quarter of all species that are on the IUCN Red List are currently threatened with extinction. Some kind of species even more under threat than others. You can see that especially amphibians, also conifers are under immense pressure around the globe. There has been progress in kind of protecting biodiversity areas, but progress has also stalled over the last 5 years. So if we look at the percentage of key biodiversity areas that are protected, we see only very, very slow process or a stalling of progress around the world. We have seen some progress towards sustainable forest management in some parts, but at the same time, in the last 20 years, the world has lost 100 million hectares of forest. And as we all know, deforestation is ongoing in many parts of the world, including in our world region. A positive development has been also in our region that most countries have adopted legislation to prevent invasive alien species. So this issue has been recognized. A lot of countries have developed legislation, but developing legislation is one thing, and halting the negative impact of invasive alien species is, of course, another. So these were just some kind of the key figures from last year's SDG report. And I also wanted to just quote the 2021 SDG report and SDG 15, where it says that even though we know that restoring our planet is fundamental to sustainable development. Our forests are being cut down, biological diversity is declining, terrestrial ecosystems are being degraded at alarming rates with very profound consequences for human survival and well-being. Land degradation affects around 1/5 of the Earth's surface. Wildlife trafficking threatens human health, economic development and security through the spread of zoonotic diseases, as we have just experienced with the pandemic. And the pandemic has been a reminder that threatening biodiversity, we threaten our own survival as humanity. So let's have a look a bit at our own world region. The major threats to biodiversity and ecosystems are habitat loss through urban sprawl, the sealing of surfaces, the expansion of industrial development, transport networks, etc. Pollution, of course, ongoing pollution, whether that's through not unsustainable agricultural practices or industrial pollution. Of course, we have the overexploitation of ecosystems, whether it's forests or agricultural land or wetlands. Invasive species, we've already mentioned them, even though legislation is in place, they continue to threaten our original species. And of course, climate change is showing its effects on biodiversity and ecosystems across the region. Let's have a look at some of the targets under SDG 15. Well, the first target 15.1 is that by 2020 already, which is years ago, we wanted to ensure the conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of terrestrial and inland freshwater ecosystems, of forests, of wetlands, mountains, and drylands. So we will talk about forests and mountains in a minute. Just looking at wetlands. So wetlands are under immense pressure across our region, including, for instance, in the EU, where a lot of the wetlands border areas that are under intensive agricultural use. They border transportation networks. So many wetlands across our region are under immense pressure. And we also are failing so far to designate and to protect all of the most important wetlands across our regions in line with the Ramsar Convention. The second target, 15.2, is about sustainable forest management, halting deforestation. So this is another major challenge in our region. Deforestation is ongoing in quite some parts of the wider European region, but also the kind of slow pace of restoring degraded forest. Only 2% of forests in our region are in some kind of original state. 33% of forests across our region are monocultures, forest monocultures. So they're basically not forests in a biological sense. So even if we see indicators of how much forest do we have in our region, and this indicator is going up, we're having more forested land. The percentage of forested land is going up, but it's not necessarily biodiverse, rich forest. But yeah, at least a third are monocultures, which are of very low biodiversity value, as we all know. So here we also need to be careful with the indicators. If we're only looking at the percentage of forest land in our region, that might not be very telling. But we need to really look into indicators that say more about truly sustainable forest management. Then we have target 15.3, combating desertification. Also the degradation of land and soil, droughts and floods. So also here our region is seeing massive challenges. I'm just thinking about the progressing desertification, for instance, in Central Asia, which is a major concern, but also in the southern part of Western Europe around the Mediterranean basin, where southern Spain, southern Italy, southern Greece, etc., are of course threatened by progressing desertification. Last year, we have seen some of the worst, probably the worst flood catastrophes in Western Europe in many decades, which have been very clearly linked to climate change. So also here we are seeing massive challenges, mostly linked to progressive climate change. Then we have a target on mountain ecosystems. Large parts of our region, of course, are mountainous areas, whether that's the Pyrenees, the Alps, the Caucasus, etc. And for instance, talking about the Caucasus, as we all know, this is one of the globe's hotspot, biodiversity hotspot areas. So an area which is extremely important for us to protect and to restore. Of course, here we have a lot of challenges ranging from the difficulties to work across borders with a pan-regional approach. Of course, also political conflicts in the area. So here we definitely need to ensure that we step up our efforts to protect our mountain areas. Last, I also wanted to talk about the sharing of benefits, which is another key target under SDG 15. So of course, also here, also in our region, we of course still see big challenges in terms of who is able to benefit from our natural resources. Is it the local communities? Is it the rural communities? In some cases, of course, our indigenous peoples that we have across our European region, or who is mostly benefiting from our natural resources. So also here we have still a lot of challenges ahead. The same is true for illegal wildlife trafficking, which is often associated maybe with wildlife trafficking in Asia and Africa, for instance. But Europe is actually one of the world's major hubs for illegally traded species. The ports, European ports, are the key turning tables for illegally trafficked species. So also here we have a major challenge in ensuring that we are enforcing legislation that exists to curb illegal wildlife trafficking, that we make sure our enforcers are aware of the problem, are trained, have enough resources to control and to check. But there's also a need to further raise awareness, because a lot of people actually do consume or buy illegally trafficked flora and fauna, for instance, herbal products, and aren't even aware of the fact that these are illegal products. Last but not least, about the invasive alien species, which is a problem which is often underestimated. There's more than 1,600 invasive species in our region that are threatening local biodiversity. It's a massive problem that our governments have recognized by putting legislation in place, but now this needs to be implemented and enforced. We need a stronger pan-European approach with governments working together on invasive alien species in a joint and systematic approach. So that was a very, very short run through SDG 15 related challenges in our region. Obviously, they're very diverse, given that our region covers all kinds of ecosystems from steppes and deserts to oceans and sweet water, to mountains, to forest, one of the biggest forest areas in the world, through most climatic zones. Obviously, our challenges are also very diverse, but they're very pressing. And on SDG 15, big steps forward are needed to make sure that we can reach our objectives by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Patricia, for your comprehensive contribution. I think we now can slowly go into next session. Also, I just would like to again emphasize that right now we would be happy to collect your comments on all mentioned SDGs, all comments from our region, from your experience, and just would like to remind you that we as a constituency can contribute with a position paper to the global process in preparation for HLPF, and this is exactly the time when you can contribute your comments, your inputs, which also can be included included later, and I think will be included into our position paper because it's not limited by any words or amount of characters. So please go ahead and provide your comments and questions or anything you have to say. You can raise your hand and I will provide you with possibility to speak. Or Sasha, you can.
On the screen, we already have Nurgul and Lysinka who would like to come in, as well as Julia. So I think Nurgul, you were the quickest. So why don't we take Nurgul Janayeva? And we will need to listen to you on the screen. And you have, it's the, let's see if Secretariat can get Nurgul. Can you get Nurgul? Nurgul Janayeva? Yeah. Okay, Nurgul, go ahead, try and speak. No, it's not working.
No, she's
Can I unmute you? No, I cannot. Okay, then we just take the, now, Nurgul?
Yeah, now I see, because I was not able to unmute myself. Thank you so much. And my congratulations with the fantastic presentations. Thank you for raising all these important issues. I want to suggest some additional points on the goal number 17. I think that as a goal itself, being annually reviewed in our countries and the RFSL also, it is the weakest part in the VNRs. And I would like to draw attention of the civil society organizations to pay more attention, to focus going to the HLPF, that in VNRs ensure that means of implementation are covered much, much better than they used to cover. For example, on finance, means of implementation, which is formulated not only in the 17, but also as 5C1. Absolutely weak level of legal reforms to support the indicator 5C1 reaching this indicator. Also, I think it's important to pay attention to technology, capacity building, training, and most important to systemic issues. In our countries, we deeply lack policy institutional coherence, at least in majority of our countries. In Kyrgyzstan, for example, policy institutional coherence is one of the weakest parts, and it will be good if we demand improving and making mechanism. Regarding multi-stakeholder partnership, we maybe have a stronger language and demand institutionalization, urgent need in institutionalization of civil society organization in all decision-making processes and bodies. This is, we strive for multi-stakeholder partnership, but we need institutionalized participation. I think it's also will be very important to demand much stronger emphasis on data monitoring and accountability. 4 years accountability, it's not a good practice. Thank you so much, and thank you for the possibility to share with you.
Mm-hmm. Great. So yeah, then let's take Lysinka, which is let me see if the technical people can get Lysinka as a speaker.
You hear me? I just unmuted myself, Sasha. Thank you very much, Sasha. Like Nordic, I would like to focus on SDG 17, and that brings us back to Anton and his very, very rich presentation. Anton, I would like to focus on the financing of all of the SDGs and the full involvement of all people, and also the minimum living wage, which you mentioned. Those were just 3 of the many, many suggestions you made. Thank you for your speech. To meet the Agenda 2030 deadlines, it requires a holistic approach that involves all people, the whole global economy, as well as the private sector that is at present one of the main players. During the first lockdown for the COVID-19, a number of us who had been involved with a financing project before decided the time had come to push it. And so we got together to try to implement a project. This project was introduced firstly by Peter Kwatra, who was a Dutchman and a European, and it was endorsed by the Nobel Prize winner Jan Tinbergen, who was also a Dutchman. And it was described in 3 books, one of which was financed by the Dutch government. And it consists of 3 aspects. One of them is an extra income for all people. And that includes also women and young people, which can only be spent, this additional income can only be spent on sustainable goods and services. Now, this allows each person to fill their own individual personal potential. The second aspect is a global online marketplace for trading these goods and services. And the third aspect are global consultations every year, which would involve people worldwide. And the UN has held a number of these global consultations in the past, so they're quite feasible. And here, the people worldwide would decide for what this particular year, which goods and services could be considered sustainable for purchase by the extra income. The elements of this sustainable economy and basic income would do 2 things. They would involve both the left hemisphere of the brain, which is the action-oriented part, and the receptive part. That is the masculine action orientation and the feminine receptivity, which exists in all of us in various degrees. And the whole gender question is not quite as stark as man and woman. It's very much more subtle. And this economy would embrace sort of the development of both parts of the brain. If all received an equivalent of only $500 US, the equivalent, which could only be spent on sustainable goods and services, the poor could lift themselves out of extreme poverty because each member of the family would get the 500. Businesses worldwide would adjust their advertising, which would for this worldwide market, to focus on their sustainable goods and services. And the non-material opportunities for personal development and for also goods and services would be focused on by this economy. And that way you begin to get a supplementary economy which can grow ad infinitum. So because the present economy would be left intact, businesses would be able to focus their production towards the sustainable goods and services as they're ready, while the old economy can gradually disappear as the new economy takes over. Thank you. That is in fact the end of what I wanted to present.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Very interesting concept on basic income for all combined with sustainable goods and services. Let's give the floor then. And while we take the people from the floor, we also have people in the room. So let me take one person from the room, so we mix it. I see, Liana, did you have your hand up? No. Did we have anyone with a hand up in the room? Yeah, okay, I see a lady over there. We will need to push your button, I think. See if that works. Yeah. And please introduce yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
So I represent Women's Organization for Women with Disabilities in Armenia. I want to focus on SDG 4 and SDG 5 because during the pandemic, many children with disabilities when education started to be organized online. It was not accessible for deaf, for blind, and for children with intellectual disabilities. And when we speak about gender equality, we have to consider that services for reproductive and sexual health rights are not accessible for women with all types of disabilities, and also the shelters and services for women who face domestic violence are not accessible. So my recommendation to state and UN bodies to include organizations of women with disabilities in all processes of planning of their policies, programs, and legislation, and also states should increase its budget and provide more finances to make education processes and also services for health care, for domestic violence accessible for all. Thank you.
In the Google Doc, so that we will have all these key messages, and we will continue working on them also this afternoon. So we continue to take some more input, but I want to specifically thank the colleague from Armenia for this input, which is noted down. And I think it's a very good call that you ask for a space at the table for people with disabilities, particularly women with disabilities, because you have very specific needs and which are often overlooked in policy making. So we will take this into the document, which we will further discuss now and later today. I see a few more hands from the floor. Nelia, can you tell me who was next?
Okay, I just thought that we will take somebody online.
Yeah.
I also actually have some comments, but I think I will give them.
And then we go back to online. So next speaker from the floor and then back online.
You have to push the button and that we can hear. Yeah, perfect.
I would like to add the blue washing besides the green washing for SDG 14.
Could you please introduce yourself, just that we know? It was completely fine. I just want to know that you introduce yourself. We could hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you. It's okay.
Yeah, just tell us your name and where you're from.
I would like to add the blue washing besides green washing for SDG 14. Blue washing refers to deceptive marketing to overstays a company committed to responsible social practice. It can be interchangeability with the term greenwashing, but has a greater focus on economic and community factors. Alternatively, it will be praised as a way to companies hide the social demand that their policies have caused. For example, those companies producing and selling water, and they are consuming high amount of water bottle, those ready to sell water bottles. Sorry, I'm Huriye Gancoğlu. I'm representing women in fisheries society in Turkey.
Thank you very much. Should we continue? Okay. So please, next person, Julia. Online, please, Julia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm Julia Masogo and speak on behalf of the International Trade Union Confederation. So I'm here also representative of the Workers and Trade Unions Major Group. I have two quick comments. The first one is on SDG 4. And actually, thank you to all the speakers. I think your presentation was very interesting and very comprehensive. I would just like to add, as far as SDG 4 is concerned, from the trade union movement, we would like to see reflected not only, of course, the call for quality public education, but also the call for the universal entitlement to lifelong learning, meaning that all of us have the possibility to learn throughout our lives. And that's particularly important for workers that have to face the digital and climate transitions in order to be able to reskill and upskill. So, and of course, we call for the universal entitlement. That means that women and youth and all the, that everybody has the same right to to be able to permanently learn and reskill. So that's my point 1 on SDG 4. Another point on SDG 5 is related to equal pay for work of equal value. This is extremely important for us. We have to face the problem of the gender pay gap, which still persists at around 20% globally, and it's even higher in Europe. And that's why we would like to see a reference to equal pay for work of equal value and minimum living wages in our statement. This is linked to SDG 8.5, which does talk about equal pay for work of equal value. But this calls for specific interventions from our governments in the UNECE region as far as anti-discrimination legislation is concerned, pay transparency, and also the universal ratification and implementation of the ILO Convention 100, which is on equal remuneration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julia. Shanas?
Shehlas Kemas with the Women's Major Group Secretariat. I just wanted to make a point related to SDG 17, where we also talk about the role of the private sector and how they would contribute to the implementation of Agenda 2030. Private sector being a very important stakeholder in the process, we should nonetheless do not forget about their accountability to the work of the UN and the work they do on the ground and the people they affect through their work, and should make sure that any form of public-private partnerships shouldn't replace the responsibility of the state, and make sure that they are human rights based and have gender equality at their core as well. And for that, we need accountability to make sure that we can hold them accountable. So in that case, the UN binding treaty on business and human rights is an important one that is still under discussion. And we also want to note that in these multi-stakeholder platforms where civil society is with the private sector and the member states and the multilateral institutions, we should make sure that we realize the unequal power balances within the process. We might be stakeholders in the same process, but that doesn't necessarily always mean that we have the same power on the table. So those are some of the things I wanted to make sure we mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nas. Anyone else? Yes, I see two more hands. First lady in the back. Please don't forget to introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Andrea Nakova. I come from the Association for Youth and Education, the Hidden Hero in Each Kid from Skopje, North Macedonia. I would like to add a point to SDG 4. I would like to say that in the past years, when talking about non-formal education, the main focus was put on sexual education. And even though there is nothing wrong with including sexual education in the non-formal or formal process, I would like to emphasize the importance of eco-education, which we can see that there's a lack of nowadays. And I think that that is something we probably most of us realized during the pandemic, how important eco-education in school is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this comment. Please.
Thank you very much. Okay. My name is RV Bastian from Global Youth Action Network. I base in Stockholm, Sweden. And then I would like to reiterate about the SDGs goal 14 and 15 and 14 on the life underwater. I would like also to ask and to talk about the microplastic pollutions, because it's one of the global issues as well that we have to raise during these sessions, because I haven't heard that much during this panel, but I have heard that in the other region, for example, in the Asia Pacific, because most of the microplastic pollutions not only pollute in the European Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, but also it's exporting to the other regions such as the Pacific Oceans. And then on the land, I would like to talk about the non-sustainable consumption and productions, because of the one of the deforestation issue, it's the illegal logging, not only about because of the mining sector, but also about the palm oil plantations. And as we know that our region also is a big of a consumption on the palm oil, and then it's mostly imported from the tropical forest. And then it is our responsibility as well that we demand this private sector to the government to just use or to stop that practicing in other countries that that contribute to the deforestation. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, if
you can send to all of us, send to secretariat more inputs.
yeah, yes, Yulia.
Good day. My name is Julia Ostrovska. I'm from Russia. I would like to the goal number 5, that in current situation, it's extremely important to us to pay more attention to women at risk. I mean, migrants and refugees, and problems of violence and trafficking and reproductive rights. And we need to add some points to our statements according to the special groups of women.
Thank you very much. Yes, please. Yeah, just push the button in the middle.
Thank you very much. My name is Remina Almazbekova. I'm from Kyrgyzstan, from the Central Asian region, and I want to comment the SDG 5. For example, the countries of Central Asia are the parties to goal the SDG 2030. And for example, in Kyrgyzstan, we have the 446 professions are prohibited in our country. Last year in Kazakhstan, the feminist organization called by Feminita, they lobby that that in countries there now no prohibited professions for the for women, and I want to say that these prohibitions aim it's a reason why we cannot aim the SDG goals. Thank you.
Yeah, I really would like to comment on the presentation from Kazakhstan. I find it really interesting. We also had, for example, in countries sectors where women, especially women of reproductive age, for example, were not allowed to work, but out of reproductive health reasons. So I think that is still important, that we don't want to mainstream women into very polluting jobs where they will get cancer or whatever, right? So if there are highly dangerous sectors, we should clean up these sectors and get rid of them instead of having more women working them. I visited women in a uranium mine in Namibia, where they had fought very hard to be able to work in that uranium mine, but then they were getting lots of health problems. So I think it's really about making sure that, yes, you should be able to be a taxi driver or a truck driver or a train driver, because these are also sometimes sectors where it's forbidden. But if it's about working with chrysotile asbestos, uranium, highly hazardous chemicals, and pesticides, there we should first make sure that we have the highest occupational health standards, and even that we phase out these very hazardous, unsustainable sectors. So I think it's a combination of both. And I think working also from an environmental health perspective, that's an important issue to take into account as well. Thank you.
Anton, did you want to add something?
Thanks so much. Regarding the notes from Shehnaz, and I just want to add something to SDG 17. Our view know about the failure of Rio Declaration, and then private sector practically refused, mainly the big corporation, which are one of the main actors and provide impact on nature around the world, human rights, and practically they refuse to sign this declaration. Then United Nations changed their approach and start trying to negotiate directly. It's a very hard process because practically they are not, it's very difficult to put them under regulative mechanism or regimes. And last year that we have discussed, and I hope it will be the new opportunity to make restriction of this international corporations which are not following international standards and legislation, and don't give them access to countries which are UN members and signed the contracts. And from other side, specific to give them specific certification, this which already have following the standards. And regarding the SDG 5, I also want to take a word. And you know what is the situation in Ukraine. People are suffering from both sides. We have a lot of refugees, and already there are cases of women which are disappearing. Just it's not only on a territory of Ukraine, and they're on a territory of countries which are they already like recognized like refugees. And it's very difficult, and maybe the EOM and UNHCR must take urgent measures regarding that, because I think they delay with that, because at first they start sending information, providing information how the refugees can protect themselves. And there is one more problem. A lot of these refugees which are coming in my country, and Romania and Poland, also Moldova, still refuse to make registration like refugees, because they hope that soon they will go back home. But it's another question, and it also is dangerous, because the governmental institution cannot provide them support from one side and be in touch with them in any time. They just like tourists, and no one knows how they are and where they are.
Thank you, Anton. You want to go?
One point.
Okay.
First of all, thank you very much to all of you who provided comments and inputs to SDG number 5. It's very important. Due to the limited time, we presented only a few points, you understand, but our document will be placed on website, and you can contribute more and to explore all our issues. You understand, we have many targets, many indicators, and they should be implemented. But I'm from Moldova. I would like to stress your attention exactly on the issues mentioned by Svitlana, by Yulia, by Anton, and all of you. Today, we refocused our activity on humanitarian crisis to assist refugees. But what will be the next step? We need more money. We need more capacity to address all issues relating to refugee gender needs, practical gender needs. We should take this into consideration. In this context, I'd like to address and ask support to our international partners. Please invest in our women's NGO who are focused on these issues, because capacity building is the precondition on effective addressing to the needs of refugee and vulnerable people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Valentina. And now sorry, I permit myself to give some comments also. I mean, first of all, I think, no matter what we are talking, statement or our position paper, we really need to give particular space to the Ukraine, to Ukraine, to the situation with refugees on SDG 5. I also think we really need to mention on SDG 4 that basically the whole educational system in Ukraine is under crisis right now, because so many people just, and children especially, left their houses. And I mean, of course, in some countries, they are already going to schools and so on and so forth, but still, I think it's an important issue to mention. So, and it's just one point, you know, I just think that we really need systemically look at the whole situation and see, including, for example, I like the comment of Svitlana about like military pollution of oceans, so it should be also included. And at the same time, in terms of SDG 17, I think it's really important for us to mention the recent situation with the ministry declaration that we, as a regional mechanism, are completely excluded from the consultation process. And I think it should be really mentioned directly. It doesn't make any sense to me. I just would like to inform your colleagues that just some days ago, we were informed that we are able only to participate in person in New York, but we as a constituency are regional constituency. We basically cannot be there. So, and another point, I don't know if we can include it, but I really would like it to be included, because I still think that Russia is one of the key countries in the region, which obviously now influence the whole region, that our special representative of the president on SDG implementation actually resigned and left the country due to his position, anti-war position. And I mean, for us as a Russian civil society, it's a big symbolic thing, which I think should be really highlighted internationally, because basically Russian government's reaction was like, we don't care. So we basically see that Russia just internationally demonstrated that they don't care about 2030 agenda at all. So I think it's really necessary to mention in context of SDG 17. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, wonderful panel. Thank you so much, all participants. We have taken note of all the key demands. We will continue with this after our afternoon session on the VNRs. But before we take a 5-minute stretch break, but stay here, please, because we have invited the UN agencies who are working on the SDGs and this process to join us here on the panel. So we're going to invite the head of UNEP from the region, who I see Bruno is in the back of the room. And I think we have UNFPA also who is here. Yes, you're there. So we're going to invite you to join us here, and we'll start in 5 minutes. Just take a short break. Thank you. Dear ladies and gentlemen, your attention please. We are moving back to plenary session. We have a wonderful panel on how the UN agencies are engaging civil society and major groups and stakeholders, and it will be chaired by Sylvia Beals here in the room, and we'll have also Marianne Hasselgrave, who is online. And I'm handing over the floor right now to Sylvia Beals to chair this session.
Thank you very much, everyone. Just to say that I'm chairing this session rather than being the rapporteur for it, because Marianne, who was to be the chair, has not been able to come because of COVID. And so, but we're grateful that she's on the line. And I guess what I wanted to say a few words before introducing our fantastic panel, because we are in this context of COVID, aren't we? But we're also in the context of the war in Europe and the invasion of Ukraine. We are seeing vast numbers of refugees and migration and displacement. The impacts of the cost of living crises, supply of energy, ecological degradation. We've noted already that decision makers are very far removed from those who can't heat their houses and feed their families. The far-reaching effects of the invasion of Ukraine means food security is impacted. Wheat, sunflower oil, for example, problem of wheat supply of Ukraine affecting staple foods of many developing countries. This is the complexity of the scene before the UN and its entities. Two important ones we have represented here, UNFPA and UNEP, and the overlay of that on the SDG process, which emphasizes interlinkages between all the goals. So it's really important that we're not siloed between us, between constituencies and between agencies. And, you know, it was very interesting that the Secretary General formed the Global Crisis Response Group recently with a focus on energy, food and finance in the context too of climate change and COVID. So this panel is about how we moved forward together with the UN agencies on the 2030 agenda. We're really interested in the collaboration with civil society. Without us, we can't make progress, but we know there's a shrinking space for us. And we want to collaborate together across countries and constituencies and with all the entities. So the questions that we've asked our agencies to think about deal with those relations going forward. Sasha, do we have the questions up on the screen? No. Okay, well, when our questions include how the entities are engaging with civil society in the voluntary national review processes, which we'll talk about this afternoon as well, how they are working with us within the issue-based coalitions, how they are working with us to further the aims of our common agenda, what the research innovations are with us to use and generate data which we produce for SDG policymaking, implementation and reporting, and how they are supporting our common goal of human rights defense and the support of civil society to leave no one behind. So no small task, I'm afraid. So on that note, I'm going to stop my remarks and ask Bruno of UNEP to kick us off. He's going to give opening remarks and also on Stockholm +50. Bruno has to leave us at 1:45, but his colleague Wandi will take over. And then we will move to UNFPA. And afterwards, we have a a great presentation from Paramita Dutta of UNECE, who is online. So thank you very much. Go ahead, Bruno.
Thanks a lot. And really, I'm really happy to be with you today for this discussion. And you've set the stage really well, I think. And indeed, I'm joined online by my colleague Wendy, who is my advisor for the SDG in the Europe office, and I'm director for UNEP in Europe. But as I said, you've set the stage really well. We are, again, I would say, in a crucial year for the SDGs, and especially for the environmental dimension of the SDGs. We've just finished the UN Environment Assembly. I'm going to come on this as a first step. We've just finished important negotiations on biodiversity with the Convention on Biodiversity here in Geneva, and we're heading towards COP15 of the CBD in Kunming later this year. We've got COP27 coming, and we've just had yesterday an important document released by the IPCC, which once again rings the alarm bell on climate change and says that, yes, the clock has been ticking for many, many years now, and the urgency of action is more than ever needed. And with this crucial year coming, on top of a maybe post-pandemic world, we hope that, but with a world that is now confronted with one of the most important crises, at least in our region, that we have had since the end of the Second World War, we feel that the urgency needs to be put where it has to be, that is on the top of the priorities. And this is really important to have civil society bringing this message and pushing this message together with the UN. And there we've got, I think, an objective alliance, I would say. The multilateral system will survive if it's bound by the sense that it can deliver something which is essential, something which is above current crisis. And that is actually the triple planetary crisis that can bring us all together to deliver the SDGs, to leave no one behind, to have an equal participation of everyone in society and equal opportunities for everyone. And so I think this is important to get this big picture, to keep this big picture in mind as we move in the year and as we work together to achieve the SDGs. I said that it's a crucial year, and it started with the UN Environment Assembly. Some of you were there, and this assembly, which was one of the first face-to-face meeting in the environment world since 2 years, adopted a number of very important resolutions that contribute towards SDG 14 and 15. And let me just say, one resolution on the protection and conservation and restoration of lakes, one on nature-based solution and ecosystem approaches to protect, conserve, and restore sustainability. And this is very important because it's the first time in a UN setting that we've got a definition of what nature-based solutions are. And as you know, nature can and should be our strongest ally in fighting climate change and in tackling the biodiversity crisis that we are facing. We also agreed, and it's an extremely important moment, it was really driven by civil society as well. We also agreed on setting up an intergovernmental negotiating committee to develop an internationally binding, legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. And this is really an historical moment. We call it the Paris Agreement of plastic, if I could say, and hopefully with the help of all stakeholders, with strong engagement and strong watch from civil society, we have a pathway to get to a legally binding agreement that will limit the pollution of plastic, that will therefore help us in fighting the third pillar of pollution, which is the third existential crisis that we have on our planet. We also adopted resolution to strengthen the science policy interface so that science is really at the center of our decision making. And other resolution, I want just to mention one on the One Health approach, because there we've been able to link all the dimensions of the health crisis, including then the need to invest in enhancing the provision of ecosystems services related to health, and how air quality notably is an issue for health. So this UN Environment Assembly set the stage for ambition, but this ambition will be delivered only if we are working all together and with the support of you all in achieving this, in keeping us accountable for this, but also keeping our governments who are going to negotiate this notably this agreement on plastic, keeping them accountable and pushing their ambition higher. Pushing the ambition is also what we want to do with the Stockholm +50 conference, which is approaching now, will be in June, and it will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Stockholm conference. That is the founding moment in the UN system, when the environment became, I would say, another pillar of the development system. I was going to say an equal pillar, but we know that it's not exactly the case yet. So we need to have the ambition so that it becomes an equal pillar, so that the prosperity, the people, and the planet come together in a beautifully shaped triangle, if I could say. And during this Stockholm +50 conference, we're going to organize, with your support as well, 3 leadership dialogues. One that will reflect on the need for action to achieve a healthy planet and prosperity for all. One that will look at achieving a sustainable and inclusive recovery in the post-COVID time, and one that will look at accelerating the implementation of the environmental dimension of sustainable development. And that's the equality of the pillars, if I could say, that comes into this. And these dialogues are expected to bring clear and concrete recommendations for action at all levels and mobilize the global community behind cooperation and acceleration to deliver the SDGs. As the executive director of UNEP has put it, and she's also the Secretary General of the Stockholm +50 conference, this is a chance to reshape the national and global interactions, a chance to deliver equity, a chance to amplify a global movement for a more caring world, one that takes the concern of civil society, of youth and vulnerable people into account, and a world that creates a relationship of trust and turn commitment into action. So now you're going to say, of course, these are beautiful words, but in the current situation, it's going to be difficult to achieve. And it's true that we can't ignore the tensions and the political situation, which is taking place in Europe. But we need to have this ambition once again to elevate ourselves, to put this triple planetary crisis really at the center of what the UN system can deliver, because this is what brings us together. There will be crises, there will be pandemics, there will be other moments of tensions. But if we don't solve this existential crisis, then we really have a problem. And this is where civil society again can push ourselves into the UN system, but also in society to prove the value of our ambition, to prove the value of the need for transition to a greener economic model, and to push into society the idea that this is politically relevant. This is not only policy and scientifically relevant, but also politically important, because we only have one planet. To do this, the UN system in the region is using notably the issue-based coalition that is a tool that has been created to bring together UN agencies around thematic areas. And so we lead UNEP Regional Office together with UNESCO and UNECE, lead a coalition of 18 agencies that look at climate change and environment in the region and bring into the UN system this strength of our common action and common agenda. And as we go with the IBC, we are bringing technical and policy knowledge to the UN country teams. We are helping them basically to transform the technicality of their program into an action which, as I was saying earlier, will be politically relevant, will be politically understood by decision makers, so that the environment, climate, nature, and pollution together with green transition become the topic of decision making for tomorrow. And with this, we really hope that we can make a difference. But once again, we will make this difference all together, and by bringing at every occasion the idea that there is a need to elevate our thinking and to look at the planetary crisis as the defining call for action. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bruno. And if we could have a copy of your remarks, we will put them on our website, which should be great. I should have mentioned as I began that Bruno is the UNEP Director and Regional Representative for Europe. He has served in the Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a diplomat in Japan, China, and South Africa. And he then worked for the European External Action Service. Before joining UNEP, he was deputy head of the delegation of the European Union in Kenya. Right? Thank you very much, Bruno. And we will take questions, discussion at the end, but if you have to go one day, we'll field them. Thank you. And now it gives me great pleasure to move to UNFPA, one of the most important agencies for us in this region, and also leading or part of some of the issue-based coalitions. And Julia is the acting regional director for Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Julia is from Italy and has worked for the UN since '95 and has served in Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Nepal, in New York, in Pacific, and in Eritrea. So it's a great pleasure to have you with us, Julia, and to follow how we take these existential issues and make them into programs which leave no one behind. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and it's a great pleasure to be here today. Yes, so much to talk about, but let me try to focus on a few issues. First of all, for those who maybe don't know UNFPA, we are United Nations Population Fund. Our main focus is on sexual and reproductive health, gender equality, but also we have a strong data component to bring the evidence for policy making. And at global level, we have 3 transformative results, we call them. So by 2030, we want to really end preventable maternal mortality. We want to end unmet needs for family planning, and we want to end all forms of gender-based violence and harmful practices. And I think with what is happening now with the war in Ukraine, we are again reminded of the importance of these issues. And I think you've all seen, women, had to deliver in shelters or in really very, very difficult conditions. And this is an area where we are, working very closely. Also, we launched very recently, every year we launch an annual report on the state of world population. And this year's report focused on unintended pregnancies. And it shows how globally 50% of pregnancies are unintended. And the report clearly shows that there is a strong correlation between unintended pregnancies and gender inequalities. And that's what I want to bring to the fore, because we know that gender inequalities really cuts across all of the SDGs. And unless we address gender equality issues, we won't be achieving the SDGs. A recent report that just came out in the region shows that 45% of the SDGs will not be met unless we really accelerate progress or reverse the negative trends. And as UNFPA,
as I mentioned, our focus, but we also want to make sure that, again, no one is left behind. And we focus in particular on, depending on the country, of course, we have to identify who are those most left behind. But generally speaking, we focus on key populations, people living with HIV, in some parts of the world, the Roma people, older persons. Sometimes this is neglected as a target group, but it's very, very important to really highlight the needs of older persons. Of course, adolescents working in or living in rural areas very often are left behind. So again, depending on the country, this is really our job also to highlight the, who are they and how they can contribute to policy making. We see, of course, the role of CSOs are fundamental. We consider that CSOs are the feet and the hands on the ground of the international community. The CSOs are where the UN cannot go very often. At the same time, what the UN can do is to really elevate the issues that CSOs are facing at community level to the policy level, where sometimes access is not there. So it's a very much of a complementary role that both the UN and the civil societies can play. And so, for example, since you were asking about the VNRs and how CSOs can engage and how the UN can help CSOs engage. We have a good example from Moldova. In the previous panel, I heard the representative from Moldova talking about the importance of capacity building. Oh yeah, you are there. And so in Moldova, as you probably know, the UN together launched this Youth for Moldova for Global Goals in 2020, involving young people to really build their capacity to understand the importance of the SDGs, how they can collaborate, how they can contribute to the SDGs, and also how to promote solutions, through digital media, through social media. And this became such a popular movement, and so many young people got involved that in the end, 17 of them became media ambassadors, the most active ones, and they even participated in the VNR process and in the VNR report. So this is one example of how you can work through mobilizing young people, but also capacitating them to be contributing to the VNR process. Also, in many countries in this region, the UNFPA chairs or co-chairs the youth theme groups, and these youth theme groups are always involving different civil society groups, again, to bring their issues also to the fore at different level. So this is just another example, because we know that we live in a very unequal world and inequalities are growing. And that's where, again, the importance of identifying those most left behind becomes crucial. And if I may bring another example, which also links to research and data, which is one of the other questions, as UNFPA, we also support the population and housing censuses. And we know that the round of census that is going on now because of COVID, censuses were postponed in many countries, but it's happening as we speak. In Kyrgyzstan, for example, the census is going on right now, in other countries as well, and across the region. And there, for example, we work very closely to ensure that issues of disabilities, the questionnaire on disabilities is included in the census. So again, to bring this data and these issues to the attention of policymakers. So again, just one example of how you can make use of data to then bring about issues of, in this case, disabilities, but there could be others. Also, you were asking about the issues-based coalition. So UNFPA co-chairs with UN Women the issue-based coalition on gender equality, and with UNICEF the issue-based coalition on youth. And there again, there can be examples of where CSOs can be involved. And for example, when I think it's last year, when there were issues with civil societies activists in Belarus who were, marginalized or in difficult positions, the issues-based coalition organized a consultation, which became a global consultation with different activists from around the world, Latin America, and in different countries, so that they would not feel isolated. And I think this is another very important part of the work that we can work on, is to form and strengthen networks, so that whether it's human rights defenders or different groups that can really come together and support each other. And we have in this region a lot of opportunities also for regional collaborations. I was in Central Asia until a few months ago, and there are a lot of opportunities for collaboration at regional level within Central Asia. The same thing in the Balkans and other regions. So this is just an example of where as UN, international organization, we can support civil societies in forming those and strengthening those networks so that they can become more powerful also actors, in influencing the policy level. I think I will stop here unless there are things that you want me to highlight or if there are questions, since I know that you have been in meetings all day and maybe getting tired, but happy to be here and take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Julia. I'm sure there will be questions. If there are no burning questions, though, we have one. Please.
My question is to Bruno. Today's morning news from Ukraine that Russian army attacked huge storage of nitric oxide. It can be recognized as chemical weapons because Rubezhnoye town is completely closed by this evaporization from this huge storage. Each day, our Ukrainian NGO are making registration crime against environment. This is real. Each day we have new and new example of crime against the environment. And my question is about how we can work together to stop such crime. Which instrument do you see? How to stop? This is real chemical weapons, because whole towns, I don't know how many people will survive from this accident today. And how we can stop, how we can work together, and what is your opinion about this register from Ukraine? It is not about Ukraine because all neighboring country or region is struggling from this crime against environment. This is Black Sea everywhere.
Thank you very much, Svitlana. Please, if you can answer quickly, and then because I know you have to.
I'll answer, and then I'll have to go indeed. But thanks for bringing this question, and I think it really mirrors what I wanted also to explain about the importance to keep the multilateral system united around triple planetary crisis. So we face a very divisive world today, and obviously the conflict is a conflict where the UN, by its nature, has the responsibility to bring parties to look also at the environmental damage. And so we do, I think, as a system, there are, especially in UNEP, we activate the remote sensing, and we are we witness these situations. But the most important phase for us will be when we start rebuilding. And when we rebuild, the need of being united as a system and having countries to cooperate with the system will be essential. Because these issues indeed are transboundary in nature. When an environmental damage happens, be it in a crisis or industrial accident or war situation, the repercussions are larger. They go transboundary most of the time. So we need to keep this in mind, because the reconstruction period will be what brings us again together, and hopefully the environmental dimension of it will be essential.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to hold more questions until we have heard from our next UN representative, who is Paramita Dita, who works with the United Nations Research Office, UNECE. Yeah.
Paramita, please raise your hand so that the tech people can give you the floor.
Okay, and I'm just going to introduce her very quickly.
Yeah.
Paramita has worked in designing and delivering programs as working towards the implementation of the 2030 agenda. And she's been at UNRWA for some couple of years. And before she worked at the Energy and Resources Institute in New Delhi. So I'm going to ask it, if that's all right, Briljana, we can come to you in a minute. Okay, thank you. Please go ahead, Paramita. We're delighted you can join us.
Thank you. I hope you can all see my screen. I have a slide up. Yeah, thank you. So yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so sorry I couldn't join you in person there. I'm connecting from Bonn, Germany. A big thank you to the organizing team for inviting UNRWA to be a part of this panel. For those of you who are not familiar with UNRWA, UNRISD stands for the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development. We are an autonomous research institute within the UN system that undertakes interdisciplinary research and policy analysis on the social dimensions of contemporary development issues. We interact with a variety of UN bodies, from providing advice to the UN Secretariat to knowledge exchange with UN specialized agencies. We have channels into national policy making through our relationship with UN intergovernmental bodies. And the NGOs and civil society actors, who are key advocacy voices, practitioners, and policy influencers in their own right, are our strongest stakeholders and allies in this process. Moving on to my presentation today, I'm here to talk about UNRWA's latest initiative, which is a global research and action network for a new eco-social contract. Let's have a look at the short video to know more about our initiative. I hope the video plays.
Amita, but we can't hear the video. Is anybody hearing the video? No. So maybe you can just give us a short summary of the video. Thank you. Paramita online, please. Okay, Paramita, go ahead. No, she doesn't have it. No, yes, it's okay. Good.
Okay, can you hear me now? Sorry about that. Okay, so I'll just tell you about what the initiative is, and basically that is what we wanted to show through the video. We thought like it would be a good change for everyone who's been listening to back presentations probably. So this initiative is for a new eco-social contract to deliver to 2030 agenda. So what we wanted to show you through the video is that we have come up with this, we launched this network in November 2021 together with the Green Economy Coalition, and it is open to all sectors, and in the last 4 months we have about 130 members already. So why do we need this network? So in the past few years, what we found to our research is that disparate but connected voices are each in their own way championing a new social contract. We have heard the Black Lives Matter movement, we have heard ITUC, the International Trade Union Congress, We have heard the Secretary General, we have heard the World Economic Forum, all calling for a new social contract, which is more inclusive, which is more directed towards sustainable development. Yet it is not only the social contract, but also our relationship with nature that seems to be broken at this point. A new eco-social contract based between people and governments is urgently needed now, and to fight inequalities and spur the transformation of economies and societies, halt climate change and environmental destruction, and to maintain peace. With this thought, our network has a threefold mission: to broaden understanding around the idea of a new eco-social contract, to define its terms, which would enable a just transition, climate resilient, green and fair economies, to identify the actions, institutions, and processes available to stakeholders at multiple levels to define eco-social contracts that integrate climate and environmental justice, racial justice, respect for human rights, decent work, gender inequality, intergenerational justice, rights of individuals, and biological and cultural diversity. So the 20th century social contract, which we are all familiar with, has broken down today and cannot sustain the transformative vision of the 2030 agenda. The new eco-social contract, therefore, differs fundamentally from the 20th century social contract in many ways, and mostly by including the 7 principles that you can see on my screen, which is human rights for all, a progressive fiscal contract, transforming economies and societies, nature, addressing historical injustices, a contract for gender justice, and new forms of solidarity. We have a couple of research papers on this, and I'm happy to share it with everyone through the chat right after the presentation. We are looking forward to joining us in this movement. And if you wish to know more, please do visit our website, and you're all welcome to join the network and be a part of this effort to complement the vision of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. That's all from my side.
Thank you very much, Paramita. Don't go away, because I think there may be some questions, including this one of how we in our region can come in with ideas, partners, proposals to develop this new area of work of UNECE along the theme of partnerships. So I think now is the time for the questions and discussion. I know we have people online, perhaps, and we have people on the thing, but I'm just going to ask, can you deal with the people online? Yeah. Sasha will deal with the online, so I'm going to ask Svitlana to kick us off. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the space. My name is Biljana Ginova, pronounced they, them, representative for LGBTI Association from Western Balkans, but here as LGBTI stakeholder group also. I wanted to take the floor to raise some concerns, and this goes to this presentation today, but also to the previous panel, about the lack of harmonizations between Agenda 2030 and the resolutions, UN resolutions that should be implemented on the ground. And also I connect this with the current war that we are witnessing and the current report on the high level of rape and sexual violence against women and children. And as you expect, I'm referring to Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, and the unfortunate consequences of losing the language on reproductive health care for victims of this war crime. So my question is maybe for the representative on UNFPA, what is your mandate now? Because I know that you work based on this resolution as well. And we know how important it is that these victims are met with support during the conflict and post-conflict and urgent support in a way, but also the question is for us all here in the room, what we can do to return this language in the resolution and to, in a way, to work in partnerships to to make harmonization between the resolutions, conventions, etc., and Agenda 2030. So we make sure that nobody is being left behind. Thank you.
Would you like to answer?
Yes, thank you very much for your question. Well, as UNFPA, we are always advocated clearly for psychosocial support, but also, of course, for the prevention of any forms of gender-based violence, and also when gender-based violence occurs, also to make sure that women and girls and LGBTI and anybody being a survivor of violence has access to the relevant services and support. And this issue of language in the resolution is always coming up from time to time, but it doesn't mean that we should stop and not work in this area. And so even at global level, UNFPA has the responsibility in humanitarian setting on the gender-based violence area of responsibility, it's called. And so we are always trying to advocate through different groups, because as I said earlier, gender issues in general should be mainstreamed across all the sectors, and this is what we continue to do, whether or not the right language might be in the resolution. And very often when you are in a global setting, you have to find also compromises in the language, right? You can't always have the language that you want, but that should not stop you from still working on the ground. That's really the best solution, for us to continue advocating and continue being on the ground and bring in the voices of those who are voiceless. I think this is a very important role that we should continue to play. And in this current context with Ukraine, I think we've been quite vocal on issues of, sexual and reproductive health, but also clearly gender-based violence. And some of the, one of the things we do is we have those reproductive health kits that also include post-rape treatment. We also try to, as I said, provide support, psychosocial support. Of course, prevention is really ideally, what should be continued to be promoted. But again, the voices will always be there, whether the resolution is there or not. That's really what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I take away from that it's very important that UNFPA receive these reports, that we must talk together. Thank you. Rashima, do you want to ask a question?
Very much, Sylvia. I guess I'll just piggyback off of what Biljana was saying. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Rashima Kwatra. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the International Advocacy Advisor at RFSL. When it comes to achieving the SDGs and also in regard to COVID, what we know is that COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted and increased the vulnerabilities of groups that were already at risk. And this includes lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and intersex persons who are currently also facing a tide of of gender critical and anti-gender movements all around the world. We know that, and what we've seen is since the COVID-19 pandemics, there have been a regress on laws and policies that protect trans persons. But right now, under the current conflict as well, trans persons are not receiving gender affirmative care. LGBTQI persons who are fleeing Ukraine are going to countries where they cannot access healthcare and sexual reproductive health care as well, amidst a rising tide of overall inhibitions to rights and services. And so I guess this is more a call to have inclusive SOGIESC programs when we know that in humanitarian settings and in conflict settings, most of our populations are also left behind in policy design and in programming. So that was a comment, but I guess my question also is, are there explicit things that UNFPA is doing or can be doing when it comes to the inclusion of vulnerable groups and in working for inclusive policies as well as in programming?
Thank you. And also, I guess if online, Paramita or Wandi have any comment on that, please come back, but I'm going to ask Julia.
When it comes to in a humanitarian settings, generally UNFPA coordinates, right, the reproductive health response and the gender-based violence response. And when it means coordinate, it means you have to bring to the table the different groups that are, concerned, that are active in that area. And so I was actually discussing with the person who is coordinating the RH working group for Ukraine exactly on this point, because he actually, he's been our focal point also on issues of LGBTIQ, and he's been working very closely with groups such as the Eurasian Women's Network on AIDS, the European Network on Independent Living, the Academic Network for Sexual Reproductive Health and Rights Policy, and I have many other lists here that I will not, I mean, I can't see right now, but several working groups or several, networks. So, and that's of course one way. So one thing specific that can be done and is being done is to make sure that these groups are on the table when it comes to identifying the gaps and the needs in specifically in our mandate, sexual and reproductive health, and issues of gender-based violence. When it comes to issues of refugees, of course, it depends on the country and the type of legal environment that is in place. And as UN, we're not there to dictate what kind of legal provision there should be, but of course we can advocate when we see gaps and needs. And that's where I think having the right data and information and continuing the discussion and interaction with groups and networks that can bring to the fore, as I was saying earlier, can really help elevate this issue at the policy level. And so as UNEP, I think we are normally quite vocal in bringing issues, not only of LGBTI, but any vulnerable groups or groups that are left behind, particularly in situation of crisis like the ones that we are experiencing now. So, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Julia. We're almost at the end of our time, or probably we are at the end of it. But I would like to offer any final remarks that Julia, Paramita, and Wandi would like, who both of those are online, if they would like to say anything. And after that, we're going to hear a short summing up from Marianne Hazelgrave, who is attending online, of the key points that are coming out. So if there's anyone who wants to say anything, now is your chance. I don't see anybody. Oh, sorry. Yes, no? No. Okay, so Julia, do you want to say anything in conclusion?
Yes, no, maybe just to say that, we are living in a more and more divisive and polarized world. And even when you were talking about issues of LGBTIQ, I understand that also within that group, there is now division depending on your nationalities. And I think an appeal for me to really separate the people from the governments, because at the end of the day, as humanity, we really, we need to find a space for dialogue as well. And I think it's important that we all strive, to work together, and we will have differences. And of course, there are terrible things that are happening, but it doesn't mean that the dialogue should be broken. And I really hope that we can continue. And again, if we want to highlight issues to different levels, it's important to foster that dialogue. So this is really, for me, very important message that I want to leave us all with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's terrific. That's a great message. Paramita and Wandi, do you want to say anything? They do. Great. Over to you. Who's going first? Paramita.
Thank
Go ahead.
you. Sorry. Just wanting to refer back to the last question we had from the audience and connecting it to the new eco-social contract network that we are advocating for, and the contract that we are promoting. One of the 7 principles is human rights for all. And when we say human rights for all, we are not just looking at the 20th century social contract, which was mainly for which kind of relegated women into a secondary role. We are also advocating for LGBTQIA plus, like the rights of people. And so yeah, that is my point about including them into the mainstream conversations on human rights. And to your previous question about how people from Europe can join, or organizations from Europe can join us in this endeavor, we have this network. I've shared the registration links to the network on the chat. Please feel free to write to me or and be a part of the network. We have planned a couple of activities for this year and a lot's planned already for next year. We have research work coming up where members of the network are actively contributing. It's coming from them. And we also have regional dialogues and debates planned up for this year. And so, yeah, we'll be happy to have you with us in this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paramita. Great, and we'll circulate all those details. Wandi, do you want to come in and say anything?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Excellent. So I'll just quickly respond to one of the questions on lack of harmonization on implementation of the SDGs. I think our colleague from Western Balkan talked about. I just wanted to highlight the relevance of an integrated approach, although we are looking at the 5 SDGs under review this year, but they have significant implication to the others which are not under review. So our approach within UNEP, even if we're advancing the environmental dimension of the 2030 agenda, the socioeconomic angles are actually equally important for us because they determine whether or not we'll be able to solve the triple planetary crisis that we're talking about. But there are also other triple planetary crises on poverty, inequality, which are also relevant to this work. So my take on harmonization is when we look at specific SDGs, we should also look at how they can affect or be affected by other SDGs. For example, this year, education is one of the goals to be reviewed. And for us, education is actually a glue that connects all other SDGs. If we get it right, what we do in terms of education outcome, we will not be having many of the problems and the challenges that we are talking about. So I think it is so relevant that we do take an integrated approach. We don't see them in silo, but see them in the context of they are all interconnected, integrated. And in our case, if we want to really make the case for the environmental dimension, please do make the case for how the environmental dimension is affected by the socioeconomic pillars and vis-a-vis how the socioeconomic pillars are also affected by the environmental dimension. So that's just a point I wanted to raise. Over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Wendy. That's great. And now I think we pass to Marianne. Marianne, if you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And first, may I just apologize for not being there and thank the speakers and Sylvia, you for taking over. Very quickly, my first comment is COVID is not over and we have to keep being vigilant. As far as everything that's been said is concerned, I hope you can hear me because I keep getting that my internet is unstable. As far this has been a very helpful session, as these always are. Our dialogues, and I do call them dialogues, with the UN agencies and entities is crucial. First, as for UNEP, I was not in Stockholm at the time, but I was around. And I remember it well. And if it hadn't been for Stockholm, I wouldn't be here now because it got me interested. The points that were raised, and particularly by Bruno, UNEP has always worked very, very well with civil society. And that the importance of us working together is what we have to do, not only with regard to Stockholm Plus 50, but to do with everything that's going on in this region at the present time. It is something that since in the last 50 years, we have had nothing to deal with like the situation that we have now. And what is the real cement that we really must work on is working with, not alongside and not parallel to, but with the UN agencies. We have UN Women talking to us later this afternoon, but having UNFPA, our faithful friends for many years, many years, right back at least until going back to ICPD, but beyond, it's something that we have sort of lost during COVID because we haven't been able to get together and it's not quite the same as I can tell you from sitting here, doing it online. But there are things that have been said that we need to follow up on. We can't stop now. And I would ask if you would seriously consider having not an hour with us, but a proper meeting with us, so that we can really talk through how we're going to move forward together. And with us providing the accountability and expertise, data, and all the other things that we're good at doing, and that you are working with us. With the one point that came out, there are going to be so many parallel happenings at the same time, and we need to bring them together, at least for civil society to be active. And that the initiatives that are going on, we need to be fully involved. And so I would say, finally, thank you. But please, sir, can we have some more? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marianne. That is great. A wonderful way to conclude the session. Thank you so much, Julia, for staying with us, and Paramita online and Wandi, and Marta over there from UNFPA. Another round of applause. I think there's a question about a group photo, Sasha.
Yes.
So how does that work, please?
We close the session, then we all